Welcome back to the Don't Cancel Me channel. This your boy Petrie Perfect, and today we're going to break down the Apple Music top 100 albums. As you all know, and if you've been part of the live shows, you know we really love music on this channel. So this is when I seen this, I knew I had to talk about it.
I am the man. I am the king of my land. Doing everything that I can. I know.
So apparently for the last couple of years, Apple has been putting together and working on this top 100 albums behind the scenes. I had to figure out what the criteria was for them making this list. And I seen that it was a panel of certain artists. I know more recognizable Pharrell was on the list. And a lot of young people that works for Apple was able to be a part of this list too. So it wasn't just the older generation, it wasn't just the young generation. It was both generations coming together as one to discuss this album list. And I must tell you, it's a lot of controversy in this list. Some that we're going to get into today, some I'm going to hear about in the comments. But as we know, like comedy, music is subjective. It's what you like. What do you like to listen to? What artists do you like? What artists you don't like? Of course, as I'm going through this list, I don't know every artist on this list, as this list is not just hip hop and R&B. This list is everything from pop to rock to country, hip hop, R&B, heavy metal, you name it. There's an album on this list. I'm surprised some genres wasn't on here more than others, but that's something we'll talk about later on in this video. For those who are not familiar with this list, I'm going to first go through this list. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and just bore you all going through 199, 98. I'm not going to do that. As you're going to sit on the screen, I'm going to put the list on here. Then we're going to talk about some notables that definitely sticks out. So right now, we're just going to go through the list. Then we're going to come back and talk about it. Oh, of course. Getting this list started, number 100, of course, Body Talk by Robin. Like I said, I don't know all these albums. I don't know all this music. But for those, there might be somebody who might watch this video. So number 100 definitely starts off the list with Body Talk. A lot of the albums that's notable, as you can see on the screen, a lot of albums notable here is 96 Astroworld by Travis Scott. We have Usher Confessions at 95. We're definitely going to come back and talk about that. A Seat at the Table by Solange, Flower Boy by Tyler the Creator, AC/DC with Back in Black has an album here that's coming in the top in the bottom 20. The Fame Monster, so Lady Gaga, as talented as she is, has one of her albums here on the list. Mary J. Blige, My Life, great album. Doggy Style was a very important album to hip hop. I believe that was Snoop Dogg's first album as well, so it encouraged a lot of West Coast rappers. Get Rich or Die Trying by 50 Cent will round off this group of the top 100. Next, we have number 80 through 61. Of course, Eminem, Marshall Mathers coming in at number 80. Elton John has an album on here, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. What else do we see here? Bad Bunny with an album with Un Verano Sin Ti. All my Spanish people, if I said that wrong, please correct me in the comments. Super Duper Fly, Missy Elliott. The SOS SZA, one of the newer albums on the list, but congratulations to SZA for making the list with that album. Straight Outta Compton, as we know, all one of the most historic rap albums of all time. Of course, there was a movie made after it. The impact that the album had was incredible, but does it deserve to be at number 70? Maybe that's something we'll talk about later. Master of Puppets, Metallica. I'm familiar with Metallica because of Guitar Hero. I know they're one of the biggest rock bands, heavy metal groups in the entire heavy metal history. So I don't know if that's their number one album. I'm gonna let you all tell me that, but the fact that they made the list is pretty awesome. Let's see what else we got on here. Baduism, Erykah Badu is on here. All Eyes on Me, Tupac at number 62. Of course, one of a lot of people in hip hop's eyes, he is the GOAT. So to have him album at number 62, will he have another album? Will he have something else on here? We'll see. All right, now we're going on to the next group as we break down numbers 60 through 41. Notable albums on here is Rihanna, anti, tomato, tomato. I don't know. Rihanna, that was a great album. No one that I believe that was her best album, so that was a great choice to put that on here. Guns N' Roses, with Appetite for Destruction, another classic rock album. U2, the Joshua Tree. I don't know U2. I just remember when Apple put them on our phones and we didn't ask for it. And we still don't know who they are, but somehow every time I see a music list, they're on there. Drake, as you know, my number one hip hop artist, at number 47 with Take Care. Don't believe that was the album I would have picked for Drake, but I do understand the impact that Drake had with that album. As we keep on reading, Inner Vision, Stevie Wonder. Of course, Stevie Wonder is just an icon in itself. Controlled by Janet Jackson. Great tracks on that album. And Outkast, their album was amazing as well. Now, before we get to 40 through 21, I want to stop for a moment and just say, please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's going to be more content coming. This is exciting. This is fun. But every time you like, subscribe, and comment on the page and on the channel, it helps me out big time. So please go ahead and do that. Like I said, right now we're just going through the list. As we're halfway through, we're just going through the list, just to get the list out for those who haven't seen it. Then we're going to come back and talk about it. Number 40, I Never Loved a Man in the Way I Loved You, Aretha Franklin. I've never actually heard that album. So if y'all take my black card away from that, I apologize. Illmatic, Nas, great album. I've been seeing a lot of people saying number 39 is a little too low. Too high for that. It should be a lot lower, but we'll discuss that here in a little bit. Beyonce, the queen. Oh, excuse me, I skipped over Wu-Tang Clan, one of the most iconic hip-hop groups of all time, with Enter the Wu-Tang. That came in number 37. Beyonce at number 36, with her self-titled album, Beyonce. Just a few more. Ready to Die, Notorious B.I.G. It's the only album that he released while he was alive, so that's something. What else we have on here? My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Kanye West. Amazing album. We're getting into the nitty-gritty right now, so I'm okay with that album being where it is. Anything else here? Of course, the Beatles with Revolver. The Beatles are just one of the most iconic music groups of all time. Of course, they're gonna have a couple things on here. As now we get into the top 20, which has the top 10 and also has the number one album. The top 20, you have The Chronic with Dr. Dre. Great album. Great album. Shaped hip hop for sure. You can't tell the story of hip hop without The Chronic. What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. A lot of tracks on there that's still being played to this day. Adele with 21. I've never listened to it, but I know Adele's impact with that album was amazing. The Blueprint, Jay-Z. I'm not the biggest Jay-Z fan, but I know how important the Blueprint was to hip hop. So I'm glad to see that made the list as well. And then rounding out the top 10, I will go through these one by one. Lemonade by Beyonce, Nirvana with Nevermind, Amy Winehouse with Back to Black, Good Kid, Mad City, Kendrick Lamar. We have Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder, Blonde by Frank Ocean, Purple Rain, Prince and the Revolution, Abbey Road by the Beatles, Thriller at number 2 with Thriller with Michael Jackson, and number 1, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. So those albums right there is what Apple in this panel of people have come up with to give us our top 100 albums. They said it wasn't based on streaming sales. It wasn't based on record sales, which I do think that's a criteria that you should have included, because to me, sales also determines cultural impact, because if something has a huge impact on the culture, then that's something that's going to sell in the stores. But that's something that I'll get to when I get to some of the albums that I feel like didn't make the list. But for me, getting right off the back, I'm going to go off with the albums that should have been ranked higher or lower. These are albums that just first caught my eye. And I looked at this a couple times. I'm going to miss some. So please, what I miss, y'all, please go in the comments and let me know what you think about what I said and what albums do you think should be up higher or lower. But for me, Get Rich or Die Trying. Get Rich or Die Trying was at the bottom of this top 100 list. And I do believe the impact that 50 Cent had on the hip hip hop game when this album dropped. It should have been rated much higher than I think it was in the the high 80s. The low 80s, excuse me. This album should have definitely, I don't know where I would have put it because it's so many albums, so much material, so many genres. But I would think that this album would have at least had to been, I'm gonna go with 65 or higher. It had to be somewhere in that range. Of course, I'm not saying it should have probably been top 20, maybe, or top 25, but I think where it was in the high 80s or low 80s, it was definitely too low. Another one that I believe that should have been another album that I feel like should have been low, an album that I feel like that should have been lower. Now, I'm not gonna lie, before I say this, I have not listened to this album, but I'm 99.7% sure if I did, it does not deserve to be in the top 5, and that is Frank Ocean with his album Blonde. Now, I'm not the Frank Ocean fan. I don't really know his music. I don't really care for him like that, but I'm almost sure that if I listen to that album, that you cannot tell me that all the albums that were on this, most of the albums that was on this list, and some of the albums that I feel like should have made the list couldn't have moved some stuff around so that way that's not a, you cannot tell me out of all the music it has ever and all the albums in the world that Frank Ocean album is the one that should be in the top 10, let alone, I believe it was top, what was it? It was in the, what was it? Yes, it was number 5. So let alone be a top 5 album of all time. And from what I was reading, this was just a throwaway album for him anyways, that he wasn't really, it was someone with him in the label. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me in the comments, but that's what I was reading before I made this list. A big, the miseducation of Lauryn Hill being number 1, I can't really argue that because her album was one of the greatest albums ever created. There are a lot of different lists that a lot of the different magazine and music sources that do lists like this. I believe the Rolling Stones had the miseducation of Lauryn Hill at number 10 on their list. So to be number 1 on this list, I can't be too mad at that. My opinion, though, and as great as this album is, for me, I'm definitely going to move it to number 2. And so doing that, I believe Thriller is really the number 1 album of all time. Thriller by Michael Jackson is just one of those classic albums that just goes through the test of times. We will still be singing all these songs on Michael Jackson's Thriller for years and years and years to come. Now, I understand if you want to go into, lyrics and production and what was written down and the way that the album lines up. If you want to get that technical with me, that's fine. I'll listen to your arguments. But if you want to tell me Beat It and PYT and all of these other Thriller itself, all these classic songs by Michael Jackson that's on one album, I do believe Thriller is the number 1 album of all time. So if I had to really argue with Apple on one thing, I'm going to say that Miseducation Lauryn Hill needs to go down 1 spot. Thriller needs to go up 1 spot. And I think that'll at least make the top 10 somewhat better. Now let's get to some of my bigger surprises that I saw that was on the list. The list, of course, like I said in the beginning of this video, is very subjective. Music and comedy are things that you have to like it. I can't tell you what to like. You're gonna have to like it. What music is how you feel. What music has a way of touching a person's soul. So what touches your soul might not touch my soul. But these are some of the biggest surprises that I saw on the list. And I guess I'll stay in the top 10 with these next 2. Is Kendrick Lamar with Good Kid, Mad City being number 7. Now, I do believe we just had this Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef that took over the world for 3 weeks. It was awesome. It was amazing. It got Kendrick Lamar rapping. It got Drake back in his bag rapping, and we needed it for the history of hip hop. But to sit here and tell me that album, Get Good Kid, Mad City, at number 7, which would make it the number 1 hip hop album of all time, because from 6 and 1, there's no more hip hop albums. So you're telling me, Apple, that Good Kid, Mad City is the number 1 album, hip hop album, of all time. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily agree with that. When you have such albums such as Illmatic, and you have albums like The Blueprint, you have these historic rap albums. You even got some people who would say Tupac and Biggie and their albums that are further down on the list. Out of all those albums, are we sure? I'm gonna leave it up to you to decide. To people, those that watching this video in the comments, are you sure that Good Kid, Mad City is the #1 hip hop album according to Apple? If you are, hey, I'm not. I would love to hear why, but I don't think that that should be that #7. That was a big surprise for me. Another big surprise in the top 10 was Beyonce Lemonade at number 10. I did not really understand that one. And this is coming from someone who loves Beyonce, who is a huge fan of everything that she does. I believe she is one of the biggest superstars to ever touch a stage throughout the history of music. She is awesome. She is incredible. I do think she is one of the few people on this list who had 2 albums on here, which was her self-titled album, Beyonce, and Lemonade. So she definitely deserves all of her accolades and deserves her roses. And I think she deserves to be in the top 20. I just don't know about top 10, and I don't know about that album specifically. Lemonade was a very, very, very good album. It was a great album, actually. And I believe Lemonade was the one that had the visual album as well. So if they're tying both of those and how that was very unique and very new, and that was a very trend-setting thing, if you want to add that in there, yes. But we're talking strictly music. I don't think Beyonce should be in the top 10, but I don't think she should be that far off. And I still think she should be in the top 20. Another thing that was a huge surprise for me was Michael Jackson only having 1 album. And there was 2 artists, actually. I'm gonna go ahead and tie them both together. There was 2 artists that I was very shocked that only had 1 album. And one was Michael Jackson, which of course he was number 2. I think he should be number 1, but he was number 2, which is a very high honor. And another one was Kanye West, which I believe was 26, with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. As great as that album was, I do believe Kanye West should have had College Dropout somewhere in the top 100. I don't care if it was 96. I feel like Kanye West has 2 albums that should have been in the top 100. If you want to go college late registration or graduation, hey, you can go there too. But for me, I think College Dropout is one of those albums that should have been in the top 100 somewhere, along with Twisted Dark Fantasy. Same thing with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, he is who he is. The name sends chills through your body. The man was on stage and he would just pull out a glove and people start fainting. The man made classic hits after classic hits after classic hits. Even his last album, which I think had the butterflies, the track The Butterfly, I can't remember the name, Invincible. That album, even that album was an instant classic. Michael Jackson should have definitely had at least 2 albums, but you can even argue for 3 or 4. Country music didn't have a big impact on the top 100 album list like I thought it would. I was anticipating to see a couple more country artists that would have made this list. Now, I do love country, and I know I have specific country songs, and I don't know country albums. Maybe that's the problem. But I do believe that I would have thought that country would have been a little bit more represented on this list than what it really was. My biggest surprise, I told you I was going to come back to it. And that was Usher Confessions at number 95. What? Number 95? You're talking about one of the greatest pieces of art ever created by Usher Raymond. Confessions. Everybody knows the album Confessions. Black, white, Asian, Korean, Japanese, Muslim, Indian. I don't care what you are. You were a fan of the Usher Raymond Confessions. And the fact that it is at 95 is an absolute travesty. That is incredible. I don't know what went into that one specifically coming in at number 95, but I definitely believe, my personal opinion, that Usher Raymond and the album Confessions should be a top 25 album of all time. with hit songs like Burn and Bad Girl. And I believe Yeah was on there, which is one of the most popular pop songs of all time. A Superstar, all of these incredible songs should have definitely put that Confessions album in the top 25 at least. I can probably argue top 10, but I'm not gonna get too greedy here, and I'm gonna just take top 25. Now, of course, when you're talking about albums and music and songs of all generations and all genres, something is going to get left out. And of course, I'm sure that there are people that listen to the Beatles might come and tell me that there's Beatles songs, and people that listen to country can tell me. I am a big hip hop and R&B fan, so I'm going to stick to some albums that I noticed from hip hop and R&B that should have probably have made the list that didn't. One of those is Mariah Carey and the Emancipation of Mimi. Now, some of y'all might be able to pick a different album, but I'm going to stick with that one because that one was such a classic in the early 2000s. That album really is one that people were still listening to till this day, with hits after hits after hits. And the fact that Mariah Carey wasn't on this list at all is very telling to Apple and their selection process. Another artist that was missing from this list and album was Lil Wayne. Okay, I get it. I get it. Lil Wayne is the mixtape god. But to tell me that this man don't have not one album on the top 100 album when you got the Carter 2 and the Carter 3, if I had to choose between one of them, I'm going to pick the Carter 2. But you mean to tell me not one Lil Wayne album made this list? Now I know if this was a mixtape, top 100 mixtapes of all time, Lil Wayne would be number one. But I still think he deserves to have an album on this list, even if it's in the bottom 20 of the list. Whitney Houston, with her self-titled album, Whitney Houston. Whitney is, of course, one of the greatest vocalists of all time. She is one that should have definitely been on this list with this album. We all miss Whitney Houston, but we all should know that if you have a list and does not have one of the greatest singers of all time, for someone who didn't have to get on stage and twerk and do dance moves and twists and turns, Whitney can stand in front of a microphone and sell out arenas. And her albums, you can hear it in her albums, each and every one of them. Of course, I would think The Bodyguard, of course, which is a diamond selling album. I figured they kept soundtracks away because if it's the movies and stuff like that, I guess it's not an actual album in a sense. But for her self-titled album, Whitney Houston, that album should have definitely been in the top 100, even if it was in like the 70s or the 60s, like as far as ranking, like somewhere in the 70s, somewhere in the 60s. Even if it was somewhere there, I would have accepted that. This is a diamond selling album that we're talking about. Now, this one, I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of okay with this not making the list, but I feel like I would have put it in there over some of these tracks, and that's Alicia Keys and the Diary of Alicia Keys. That album, when it first came out, was another one that just took over the culture. I'm talking 106 in Park. I'm talking about us being in fifth and sixth grade, just singing "I Won't Tell." Yeah, we all know these songs by Alicia Keys, and I feel like that album definitely deserves to have a spot on the top 100. Another diamond selling album that should have made the top 100 albums of all time is Nelly with Country Grammar. How did Nelly not make this list? Now, I know he might not be this great brand rapper and he might not be telling stories, but if we're talking about albums and cultural impact, Country Grammar definitely has some of the biggest cultural impact in all of hip hop. I don't understand how Nelly did not make this list at all. It definitely, I don't even know a word for it. It's blasphemy. I don't know if that even the way you use that word, but that's what I'm gonna say. And last but not least, I understand why this person probably didn't make this list, but then I'm gonna say that's not fair. Now we know that this person did some wrong, and this person is currently doing their time for the wrong that they have done. But there comes a time that we're going to have to separate the man from the music, and that is R. Kelly. R. Kelly is one of the greatest musicians of all time, and his album should have been the album of 12 play. The album 12 play, which he did in the 90s. Your body's call these classic songs. R. Kelly should have definitely made this list, but I definitely understand Apple, the $1 trillion brand. I understand why they didn't want to put him on this list. Now, as we've been through the list, as we talked about what our biggest surprises were, as we talked about what should have made the list, it's just some interesting facts about this list that, of course, we didn't go over every single album on this list. There's a couple of things that I found and some facts that I found that was very, very interesting about this list. One of the more interesting facts that I found out was that the 1990s really, really dominated the music industry. And as we all know, we love a good 90s party. Because 90s, we always say had the best, was the best time for music. But this is very interesting. The 1990s were the most productive decade in the Apple Top 100 albums. With 22 albums featured, the era saw a diverse explosion of genres and innovative sounds driven by cultural shifts and technological advances, excuse me. So the 1990s being as dominant as they was on the list really says a lot about that time in music. Pop records made up 16 of the top 11, while R&B put up 10 albums. Other genres such as electronic, soul, jazz, folk, new wave, reggae, reggaeton, and country also had notable entries. So that's what I meant by earlier. This list has a little bit of everything. So the fact that the 90s and hip hop and R&B was so dominant on this list really speaks a lot to the culture. Influential artists from Nirvana to Nas produced seminal works that defined the decade's music with the blending of styles, emergence of new voices, and impact of MTV contributing to a rich and diverse musical landscape. Notably, 49 albums, almost half of the ranking, were made after 1990, underscoring the lasting influence of this period of contemporary music. That is incredible. That they're saying 49 of the 100 albums were made after 1990. That is incredible. Beyonce, Prince, Stevie Wonder, The Beatles, and Radiohead are the only acts with more than one album represented on the overall list of 100. So there, like I said in my, we were missing Kanye, we were missing Michael Jackson that should have multiple albums. Probably other people. You could have probably argued for Jay-Z to have multiple albums. You can argue for a lot of other people that they could have multiple albums. So the fact that that's only the list of the only people that have multiple albums really speaks to these particular artists. And of course, like I've been saying, the most represented genre among the top 100, according to Apple Music's own tags, is hip hop. More than one-fifth of the list is made up of albums within that genre, compared to the 18% of album tagged as rock and the 16% filed under pop. So of course, with one fifth being 20%, it wasn't that much higher than the other categories that they just listed. But to know that hip hop has taken over and has impacted the way that it did really says a lot about the culture of hip hop and R&B. Of course, hip hop, R&B, country, pop, heavy metal, whatever you listen to, Apple really took their time to put this list together. Now, I know that there's people that I didn't mention. There's other people that you're going to be thinking about as you're looking at the list. How did this make it? How did this make it? I want to hear what you all have to say. This was an incredible list. I'm a list guy. I love top 10, top 20s, top 100s. I love to dissect lists and create my own list. It's so much fun because I know it's opinionated and I know it just causes conversation. And that's all I like to do is have a good conversation and have a good debate. And music is something that I am very passionate about and I love as well because music has a way of making you feel a certain way that nothing else on this world can make you feel. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed the breakdown of the top 100 albums of all time. Shout out to Apple for putting this list together. I hope they do more stuff like this, and if they do, I'll be right back here to talk about it. So please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me grow. It helps the channel grow. It's exciting. I love doing this content, so I want to make sure that I'm able to keep on doing this. But until next time, y'all, have a blessed day, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.